So I'd like to introduce the Wayne State University Collegiate Capstone Project presentation, the Optimizing Transportation Across Corewell Health Statewide System. So, first speaker, if you'd like to come up and get us started, that would be great. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you guys are having a great day. I know it's a little cold outside. We are students from Wayne State University. We worked on this project with Corewell Health, optimizing transportation across Corewell Health statewide system. That's the 22 hospitals in Michigan. So we'll go through our agenda. We'll first meet the team, go over the project proposal. We'll then go over cost with technology and current trucking. We'll then go over our current state versus our future state. And then we'll go over leasing versus miling options with 2 implementations. We'll go over mileage analysis, and then finally we'll go over technology implementation. To start, hi everyone, my name is Mia Bustamante. I'm double majoring in finance and supply chain.
Thank you everyone for your time today. My name is Zainab. I am a master's degree student here at Wayne State University studying supply chain management.
Hello everybody, I'm Daniel Salim, also a Wayne State student and undergrad student in my second year studying supply chain management and finance.
Yeah, and Zaira today couldn't make it, but we do have her recording on here, so she will be in the recording.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jesse Pratt. I'm a dual degree student at Wayne State University, getting a degree in business administration management and psychology.
Now moving on to, I'm so sorry.
Sorry.
I'm so sorry.
Hello, everybody. My name is Donovan Jones. I'm a marketing major at the Mike Hill School of Business.
Thank you, Donovan. Now moving on to our overview of proposal. So in partnership with the Mike Ilitch School of Business and Corewell Health and the Bellwether League Foundation project, we were doing a capstone project that led to enhanced transportation, cost efficiency, improved route utilization, and we were guided through Professor Kevin Kettles and the Director of Transportation, Walt.
Thank you so much, Mia. So to start, I'd like to start by outlining the structured Lean Six Sigma approach we use to optimize Corewell Health's 22 hospital network. So we started with defining our project goal, which is to optimize for a reduction in fuel and transport costs and without compromising service reliability due to the critical nature of our mission, which is patient care at heart. That next to measure, we benchmarked key metrics like miles driven, cost per mile, and on-time performance using historical data that we have. In the analysis phase, we identified cost and efficiency gaps across different routes and vehicle types. And in the to improve, we piloted optimized routing and proposed a hub and spoke network design in order to balance cost, efficiency, and responsiveness. Finally, to control, we establish KPI tracking via a software solution in order to make sure we can sustain savings and performance improvements long term. We also thought about the implementation capabilities of the solution post go live for users, which you will learn about in the slides to come. Thank you, guys.
All right, everybody, I'm going to take us to some simple costs to start. I'm going to tell us a cost per mile for the semi-truck, straight truck, and box/vans truck. A lot of our optimization and suggestions are going to fall on these numbers. So for the semi-truck, it's $1.12 per mile when we take into account fuel, maintenance, and labor. For the straight truck, it's 86 cents, and for the van/box truck, it's 72 cents, even though the margins between these two the difference between these numbers is not a lot, but when you have vehicles that are going 46, 50, 60,000 miles a year, the amount adds up. I'm going to hand it off to Zainab.
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to start by showing this radar chart here. We selected the top 8 routes based off a total cost contribution ranking for all our routes, just to show a snapshot into our data, and so we don't have to look at everything. These essentially show us the current state of our network, and here we have, as you can see, 5 different axes: cycle time, cycle efficiency, non-value added time ratio, total cost, cost per mile. You might be wondering, what is the difference between cycle time and cycle efficiency? So time tells us how long the operations take, and cycle efficiency tells us how valuable, or tells us how valuable the time is for the operation. Now, another thing to note here is with the 8 routes, you can see where they fall in terms of the scoring. So the middle of the chart shows you the exact scoring. And the further the shape expands outwards, the higher the performance score. So essentially what we can take note here is the shape is pretty compact, so I don't really particularly see success in any of the 5 given areas. But I do notice a relationship between total cost and non-value added ratio, showing me they have the most room for progress and a relationship together. And this aligns with our total cost of ownership findings, because we do find that dwell time or non-value added time aligns with essentially a gap in total cost. Thank you. So just to quickly look again at our non-value added time here, with our current state, we find that non-value added driving, or value added driving, which is movement between facilities and is productive, is at 57%. The non-value added driving at a high level, which is dwell, wait time, or idling, is at 42, essentially 43%. We'd like to bring that down. So, which also reiterates the main goal here, which is be able to choose the best network design model in order to reduce that non-value added dwell time over there. So, looking here, we can, just looking at the point-to-point model on this chart, we can see that it lands high risk, low operational efficiency, proving that it's not the ideal, obviously. But with hub and spoke, right over here, we can see an increase in efficiency. However, a higher risk of congestion, centralization, and over-reliance on one hub. Now, the hybrid model sits at the optimal spot because it is diversified, cost optimized, and flexible enough to handle both high volume deliveries, or high volume and time critical deliveries. Now, just lastly, at the final chart, we'll take a deeper dive into our non-value added time. Here we could see with semi-trucks, the total cost under point-to-point, the point-to-point system rises to $1.23 and then comes down to $1.21 under the hub and spoke model. And then the same pattern follows relatively for both the straight truck and the vans. Now, these insights altogether comprehensively give us a clear message. Choosing the hybrid network design offers us the best balance of cost, efficiency, and risk mitigation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Zainab. So when we began our project, one of the first things we needed to do was have an understanding of where the routes go in Michigan. So what we did is we mapped them all out, and we can see that the semi-routes primarily go from the west side of the state all the way to the east side, to the southeast Detroit area, the Metro Detroit area. Now, when we go from semi-route 1 all the way to semi-route 3, we can see that's from west to east. And then our last few routes, our west routes, our south routes, 33 and the Butterworth route, those are all going to primarily remain on the west side of the state. So we got a better understanding of where the routes are going, the mileage, better understanding of the type of road conditions that the equipment, as in the semi-trucks, the other sorts of transporting equipment will go through. And then one of the main functions that we did was do a comparison between the data that was given to us and the data that we compiled in recent months from current traffic data. So we did a few things. We looked at the data that we were given, and then we compared that to data that's recent that we pulled that reflects rush hour drive times versus non-rush hour drive times or regular drive times. And then the first analysis we did was to, first of all, compare the expected drive times with the newer rush hour drive times, meaning we took the data that we were given, and we compared it to newer data that reflected the how long the route would take under rush hour conditions. So as we can see, there's, to be expected. So the rush hour data was more than the given or expected data, which sort of proves that the expected is a good average marking or a good quantity to describe an average amount of drive time. So that made sense for the most part. However, if we take a look at a few of them, like for example, we have the 3C and we have the south route, and we can see that our route time that's given or expected by Corewell Health transportation folks is pretty similar to the rush hour data. So we noticed that that could be potentially a point where we could be sending out trucks at the wrong time, where we're spending too long on a single route in terms of the semi-route 3C and the Butterworth route. So our second point of analysis was to compare some of that new data that we used, so the current rush hour data versus the current typical drive time data. And we kind of saw, going back to that, there's a significant difference between rush hour data and typical drive time data, particularly in these last few routes. And the reason why we saw that, we can kind of connect it to the first image I showed you with all of the mapped routes. And we know that these last few routes, those are all driving under city conditions. So those are not going to be the ones that are going from across the state from the west side to the east side. And we can tell that when we use the highway and we utilize that, our drive times don't see a big of a change under rush hour conditions. However, when we have city-like driving conditions, the shorter routes on the west side of the state took significantly longer, and in some cases double or even almost triple the amount of time they would usually take. And then our third kind of analysis was between the drive times that were given to us, so our expected versus the current drive times that we pulled from recent traffic data, which was our typical. And we were sort of able to follow the same trend. So we saw that the last few routes, the ones that drove in city-like conditions, maintained that same trend. So the data show that the routes were similar. So if we have our comparison between our given data and our expected data, we can sort of use that to verify whether or not the data that's currently being utilized by Corewell employees is accurate. And for the most part, we're happy to see that it is accurate. There's one major exception, which was the west route, where we found that the data that we were given did not match current driving conditions. So that's a point where we'd have to take a look at that and figure out how that new data can be better incorporated in our day-to-day logistics and handling.
Thank you, Daniel. Just want to shout out Daniel. He joined our group late, but he hopped right in and he was like, what do you need me to do? And so awesome job. All right, to lease or not to lease, Corewell is eventually going to have to buy or lease new vehicles. So with leasing, costs are predictable. You might have to pay a down payment, but overall, across the years, it's going to be just the monthly payment and the interest. Relatively zero burden. A lot of times, there's a maintenance package that's involved with leasing, so you don't have to worry about maintenance. And of course, there's less upfront capital compared to buying. And depending on not all contracts have this, but there might be a possibility to regularly upgrade. Let's go to buying. It's intuitive. You'll have more savings in the long term. It's higher upfront capital, though. Additionally, if you already have an established maintenance program, the maintenance, the customization, vehicle disposal, it's all up to you. And then, of course, vehicles are an asset on the balance sheet. It's leading to more equity. I've compiled information from about 15-ish sources about the semi, the van, and the straight trucks for one unit and around the year like 2025, 2024 vehicles. So if you'll see on the legend, we have leasing. It's in yellow. That's the yellow line, buying cash up front. is the red, and then blue is the buying if you finance through a loan. I decided to go with a line graph because it's kind of fun to visualize the costs over the years. So if you'll see, obviously the leasing, it's very low up front, it's consistent. And if you'll notice, around the 6-year mark, they are almost converging. And depending on how much you're using your vehicles, if you're using the semis for, if they only last like 200,000 miles, depending on the years, it might make more sense to go with the leasing option. Then with the straight trucks, you'll see the lines compared to the 2 semi-straight truck, very similar, just the only thing that's changing is how much they cost. I'm kind of hitting on the same points here. You'll notice that around that 6-year point, I noticed that depending on the vehicle, given the information that Walt showed us, some vehicles are putting in like 30,000, 45,000 miles a year. That's not going to last 10 years. So I included the leasing option up to 10 years. Most of the time, if you lease, you are not going to have that lease for 10 years. And then finally, it's with the van. Similar, only a little bit different. You'll see at the 6-year point, the buying when you're financing through a loan and buying with cash up front is very, very similar. But overall, you see these three, you see very, very similar trend lines. And then one thing on the Bellwether Foundation thing that they wanted us to hit on was the alternative fuel prospects. So we have BEV, battery electric vehicles, and we have renewable natural gas. So that's also known as biomethane. That's a pipeline quality fuel. I'm going to start off with the electric vehicles. This is best if you want to go electric for vans and box trucks. In terms of the routes that the electric vehicles are doing, they are not going large distances like the semis, so they can do an entire route on one charge. But of course, there's low operating costs and low maintenance, but the cons, you have to establish significant charging infrastructure that you might not have. And it's going to be higher upfront capital if you buy them. And then if we go to the renewable natural gas option, this would be best if you wanted to go with alternative fuel, cleaner fuel. You probably want to do this with the day cabs, the semis. The lowest total cost of operation over a 10-year period is less if you were to buy an electric semi right now. Based on the research I was able to conduct, we don't have significant enough data to recommend doing an electric day cab. You see them around sometimes on the highway, but in general, it might not be worth the risk. So then I'm going to hand it off to Donovan.
As far as transportation technology, we provided 2 options, 2 recommendations for integration. The first of which I want to focus on is Paragon by Aptian. We are focused on their multi-depot product that they offer, which allows us to optimize routes and centralize some of our planning. It is currently being used in the United Kingdom National Healthcare Service, Venus Healthcare, and AAH Pharmaceuticals. One thing of note, in AAH Pharmaceuticals, they saw a €1 million, approximately $1.3 million decrease in transportation costs over 1 quarter, just 1 quarter. So, the proof is in the pudding. And we project a 6% median total savings using that product. The second project that I want to focus on is Coupa, Supply Chain and Planning, Supply Chain Design and Planning, powered by Lamasoft. It is it allows for longer-term optimizations. Instead of Paragon, which is operates on a more day-to-day basis, Coupa allows for optimization on a monthly, quarterly, and yearly scale. The way that it integrates is it creates what-if scenarios, leadership, inputs information that is generated from Paragon, generated from Texas, and generated from Geotab into Coupa, and allows for a multitude of scenarios to be tested and ran at the exact same time. I created a current state and a future state with Paragon and Coupa integrated. Paragon, I'm going to explain our future state. It starts with the creation of the order. That order information is all then integrated into Texas, which is then handed off to Paragon, which takes that data and generates optimized routes, schedules, and ETAs, and then creates alerts based off any exceptions that happen on the field. After the day ends, we then transport all that information into Coupa, and just that data, and runs those simulations that I described. Our implementation process for these two technologies will be run over the course of 5 quarters to give ample time for integration. You'll first start with finalizing the case, the structure, getting all the necessary data requirements. Then in quarter 2, in quarter 2 and quarter 3, we'll integrate Paragon and Coupa respectively. Quarter 4 will be focused on integrating all the data sources, and quarter 5 will be focused on training and final cutoff.
So as you know, our capstone initiative with Coral Health and Bellwether League focuses on the transportation optimization across 22 hospitals statewide. So we've analyzed 2 scenarios, one of them being scenario A and the other being scenario B. Now, scenario A is the current owned fleet operation, so we're talking primarily semi-trucks. That, of course, comes with higher fuel and labor cost. Scenario B is optimized fleet mix using lowest cost per mile logic, and it is supported by AI optimization and telematics. The goal here is to reduce cost per mile, increase on-time delivery, and modernize Coral's logistics network. As you can see, we have the metrics on the left here, which being average cost per mile, fleet composition, route efficiency, and so on. Scenario A and Scenario B are the 2 scenarios that are being compared in this table here. And as you can see, Scenario B is 30% cheaper. It gives 20% more total cost savings. There are less delays in Scenario B in comparison to Scenario A. So let's look at how the data proves this shift towards Scenario B and how it can actually create real operational and financial gains, as we will see in the subsequent slides. As you can see the bar chart on your left, under the current model, so we're talking about Scenario A, Coral's average cost per mile in this scenario is $1.12, and it's driven by semi-truck dependency primarily. Scenario B brings us down to approximately 79 cents per mile, representing nearly a 30% reduction in cost per mile. Now, these savings come from right-sizing vehicles, vans, straight trucks, BEVs, and reducing diesel reliance. But cost is just one part. We also saw major improvements in efficiency, technology integration, and reliability. Now, if you turn your attention to the bar chart on your right, which is the key metrics horizontal bar chart, as you can see, fleet composition, for example, shifting from 100% semis to a balanced vehicle mix cuts unnecessary operating costs on short routes. Route efficiency increases from 70 to 90%, supported by AI-based central dispatch and multi-depot optimization. On-time performance improves from 60 to 75% by adjusting departure windows to avoid rush hour operations. Technology maturity jumps from 40 to 90% thanks to Geotab integration for real-time KPI tracking. Financial impact is up to 20% of total transport spend reduction with a 2-year payback period. Scenario B isn't just cheaper, it's smarter, it's faster, and more transparent. Now let's take a look at the pie chart, which is on the left, and see that the total benefits divide across 4 major areas. About 30% from direct cost reduction, 25% from operational efficiency, 25% from technology ROI, and 20% from sustainability and emissions reduction. The balanced gain shows that this isn't just a single lever project. It's an end-to-end transformation that touches financial, operational, and ESG goals. So now let's translate these numbers into real business outcomes in the next slide. Now, as you can see, Scenario B enables a 15 to 20% total savings potential while modernizing Coral's logistics, and it delivers measurable gains in reliability, sustainability, and data transparency, and aligns with Coral's long-term vision of a smarter, more sustainable healthcare supply chain. The next steps would be to include pilot implementation over 5 years, gradual adaptation of BEV and RNG vehicles and KPI dashboard rollouts, as well as data integration in terms of AI-based routing and telematics. In short, this project proves that smart technology and right-sized assets can turn Cornwall's logistics from a cost center into a competitive advantage.
For our presentation, thank you guys for being able to sit in today, and we hope to talk to you guys all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Two things. One, do we have any questions for our panelists today? The one, oh, Chris, wait a minute, we're recording, so you get this one. There you go.
So my question is regarding the transit routes, was there also any considerations about the types of products and the needed time delivery efficiency on those particular products?
So with some of our fleet, we did compare and do an analysis between some of the different types of equipment. So when we compared the semi-trucks and we sort of compared that with a Sprinter or a van or something like that, we did notice that there was a small difference, but nothing really significant. So that's sort of like one of the things that we dismissed, and it kind of ties into the smaller equipment even taking longer, because it's like we didn't see any correlation between the type of driving equipment, the vehicles, with the items that they were transporting, because we can kind of draw a connection between bigger items, larger items, bigger supply cases to bigger equipment. And then from there, that's where we made the comparison between the vehicles, and we didn't see anything significant that would sort of, that would kind of indicate that there would be any differences between the types of items that were being transported.
So quick agenda on that. Were there any differences that you suggested to the various places that you were delivering to on their particular par levels?
I believe for the most part, there's our biggest understanding would be to optimize the routes. We would want to change the time where the driver is set to leave and come back. And for the most part, if we sort of went for early morning, midday, or late evening, that's where we'd see the most difference. But in terms of those other factors, I don't believe anything stood out in particular off the top of my head.
Different question. In terms of the analysis you did on propane, natural gas, and the electric vehicles, I've noted that Jeff Bezos and Amazon has now shifted in terms of shorter deliveries to EVs, and it's probably too early to really evaluate what the impacts are on your study for climate impacts, given that it's 30 degrees outside today. What are your thoughts on EVs versus propane versus natural gas versus hybrid going forward for the future, both in terms of semis and short-haul electric vehicles for panel trucks for local deliveries? Thanks. Great presentation, by the way.
Thank you. So you're just to recap your question, I just want to make sure I have everything right. So you just wanted our general knowledge on, like, what do you think is the best way to go in terms of the semis and the vans? Yes, that's a good question. Right now we have there's the most amount of research and the most amount of testing done with EVs for the Sprinter vans, just because they've been around longer. And especially with the current vans that Corwell is using, I looked at their route distances, and all of them do a route distance that is able to be done under one charge. So I mean, that's really the best idea. So for the vans, if you're wanting to go into clean energy, I would definitely think about doing it with the vans. And also, I looked into a little bit. There are certain state incentives for using clean energy that you can tap into, and actually alleviate some of that cost for implementing the new charging structure and the electricity costs. And yeah, for the semis, I said it. I only said it for like one sentence, but right now I would not suggest going EV for the semis. I think there's just less stuff, less information out there regarding their long-term viability and stuff like that. Does that answer your question? Okay. Mm-hmm.
Anyone else have a question before I ask one? You're not done yet. I'm curious, after listening to a couple of questions you had and things, what was the sort of the relationship with Corewell? How many times did you meet, and were they receptive to your ideas and things?
So we started this project, it was just me and Zena at first in February. We did a site visit at first, and then we are actually going to present to their supply chain team as well, so in the coming weeks, yes.
Well, it'll be fun to hear what they said as
Yes.
well and what they think they might implement, because at the end slide, when you had the 5 quarters you were going over there,
Yeah.
that's a recommendation should they adopt
Yeah,
it.
like the pilot implementation plan that we had. Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, thank you again for all
Thank
your
you.
hard work. Now we're going to have what we call a Bellwether League roundtable. And the topic today is assessing healthcare supply chain leadership mid-decade. Forging ahead or falling behind. And for this, we have our moderator, which is Joe Colonna, wave Joe, from Piedmont Health in Georgia. He's been the chief supply chain officer there. We also have Ed Hiscock, who's recently retired. He does like I do. I kind of put retired in quotation marks. He's been on the circuit. And he was our Bellwether class of 2022, and he retired from Trinity Health. And then we have Chico Manning, who is at PIH Health in California, and he's the system VP of supply chain. But he also comes from PepsiCo supply chain experience, as well as supply chain and logistics from the Marines. So he has a lot of different types of experience as well. So welcome our panel, and Joe, we'll turn it over to you.
Is this on? Okay, great. A room this size, normally I'd say we didn't need mics, but since we're recording, we will try to use them, and hopefully they'll work accordingly. I think we have about 45 minutes, if I've got the time right, which this panel means we'll probably get to 2, maybe 3 questions by the time we're done. We are all, 3 of us, supply chain geeks. This presentation was really amazing. We're based out of Atlanta, and we have a little bit of traffic there. And so for years, we've just, without any real data, just decided to deliver overnight because we just know there's less cars, but there's no data behind it. So I would invite you all to come and visit with us and help us figure out if we actually are as efficient as we think we are. Very interested in EVs, very interested in alternative fuels and all of those. So this is, if you're a supply chain geek, this kind of stuff gets you all excited and jazzed. And I was really excited to see how excited you all were. To my right, my immediate right, is Ed Hiscock. Ed and I have known each other, it's got to be 30 some years now. In that time, Ed has always been very passionate about data and technology. He was excited about it before it was cool. He absolutely worked on making me a convert. Early in my career, I was not as passionate about data and the importance of it. Another person is in the back of the room, Amy Chepa, who's a future famer who worked for us for a while and is also very passionate about data and good information. And then Chico is, I've just met recently. We serve on some committees together. He's equally passionate, but also comes with a different viewpoint, being newer to healthcare, but also coming outside of healthcare. We both started in the military. You were Marines, I was Air Force. The Air Force decided I wanted to be a medical logistics specialist when I didn't know what I wanted to do, and it turned out that I love it. But what I thought I'd start with today is, in starting with Ed, and I'm going to ask these questions to both of you, but in different ways. Ed, you've always been passionate about data and technology from the very beginning, when it was really hard to get people interested in it. In the time that you've been, I don't consider you retired yet, in your career, in the advancement, what is the thing that you've been most proud to see advance and come to fruition, and what are the things that you're still frustrated we can't seem to get our arms around?
Yeah, it's actually going to be the same answer. And you're right. I nerded out really early. My first degree is in electronics, right? So I'm an engineer, and landed in the healthcare supply chain, carrying a tool bag, fixing equipment in hospital laboratories. So I've always had a bent towards technology, but the answer really is data, right? Technology isn't going to serve you if you can't feed it the right information, to include AI, which we're all spun up about right now. They have to learn. They have to learn on information, quality information. So I've been proud of what our team at Trinity did with some of our data, master data management, made it a thing, focused a lot on maturing our data, curating good data for the systems to do their optimal job. What I don't think we've done well is, and Dick, you'll like this answer, UDI. And I know I should have prepared you for the eye roll when I said that, right? But it actually disgusts me when I can check myself out at Kroger and know that the farmer now knows I just bought a dozen eggs and how many's left on the shelf, right? And we're leaving parts in a human being, and those parts have barcodes on them, and there's precious few of us that are scanning that barcode and using that to transact in our industry. It's just, we know that technology exists. It serves other industries. It drives efficiency. It drives safety. I'm heading across the pond next week. The initiative to roll out UDI in the UK is called Scan for Safety. That's the moniker that they put on it, because ultimately, yeah, it's going to drive efficiency, which us supply chain nerds get excited about. But physicians don't care about that. Clinicians don't largely care about what we nerd out on in supply chain. They want to make sure they're providing the highest quality, safest environment for their patients. And so I think we can learn a lot from what they're doing over there.
Thanks. Chico, you're coming from outside of healthcare. You've been in what, now for 10 years? You've been in healthcare before that? Right. What was the thing that was the most surprising compared to outside of healthcare, and the most disappointing compared to outside of healthcare?
Yeah, so, almost 31 years of progressive supply chain experience, right? Logistics in the military, 15 years PepsiCo. And what I learned when I came to healthcare 10 years ago, I was a little shocked, right? I was shocked at the lack of data understanding, the lack of using data. I was encouraged to see that a lot of your analysis at Wayne State here was based on data, source of truth. You're going to hear that a lot, right? And so 10 years ago, when I got hired in, and I said, okay, I'm a supply guy, where's the inventory? And I was shocked, and many people in this room, of how small the storerooms were, right? And I said, so this entire hospital is serviced with what I can basically see in a broom closet. Do we know where all the finished goods are? And when I mentioned finished goods, so I came from PepsiCo CPG. So when you say finished goods in manufacturing, that is the finished product. So I refer to even supplies today in our health system as finished goods, right? Until you open the package and you implant it into a patient or you consume the consumable, it's a finished good. So why is it in healthcare that most healthcare hospitals, systems, cannot tell you without paying someone to go count and touch it, which takes time, what the value of finished goods is in your system? It's an actual number that the finance people require you once a year to count for a reason, for the P&L, right? So if we are supply chain stewards and we can't almost instantaneously or within a few minutes tell the organization the dollar value of the finished goods, where those finished goods are, where they reside, whether it's a procedural area or if it's in the supply storeroom, how fast those finished goods are turning, and whether or not they're expiring, because we're in the business of supporting patient care, so you don't want to put an expired item onto a patient. So that was the biggest shock and learning for me 10 years ago, especially coming from an industry where, I'll use PepsiCo as an example, we know the moment a potato is put on a truck until it's made into a Lay's potato chip, and the moment it's bought at whatever supermarket through IRI data, we know the entire lifespan of a potato. That was 20 years ago for me. But today, we couldn't tell that with a knee implant or a wide variety of supplies. So CPG is all about indulgences and just feeding people's impulses, eat a potato chip. We're trying to save people's lives here, and we don't know where all of our supplies are.
This is how you can identify a supply chain geek. We'll shop at Publix, which is a grocery store in Atlanta, and they'll have Coke products, and they'll do any Coke product 3 for 1. And we'll get a Sprite and a Coke and a Diet Coke. And the person will start scanning just the Coke one over and over. I'm like, no, you can't do that. You have to go each one separately so you know how many to order. Loads of fun to go shopping with. You can ask my wife, she's in the back. But I do think an overused word that I've heard, I'm now 40 years in the industry, been going to ARM meetings and other meetings, this meeting, other meetings, and you hear first everybody talk the word partnership for 10 years, and then the next 10 years make fun of the word partnership because the conversation always seems to be about price. And I think that the real opportunity to develop a true partnership is on the operational side. So in the later part of my career, I'm less interested in meeting with salespeople and more interested in meeting with the other supply chain person, the person on the other side, and having a discussion about how do you become mutually efficient. It's not necessarily I'm going to pay $1 less, you can charge me $1 more. We're all going to save $1 together. Do you have examples of where you think those opportunities are in the industry?
Yeah, actually, and I'm not speaking out of school here. We did a podcast on it. Another recent retiree, Scott Wilson from Medtronic, sales ops at Medtronic. He and I sat down together on that very premise. And I flew to Memphis, where their warehouse is, and he said, here's how Trinity shows up at Medtronic. 47 orders a day from a Trinity facility lands in that warehouse. So they would send somebody around the warehouse 47 times to pick a product, put it in a box, put it on the back of the FedEx truck that lives at their dock. And then that FedEx truck would take it to its destinations, not that truck necessarily, but FedEx would get it to the destination, and I would have 47 receipts and 47 invoices. And I said, well, you know what? I've got a distribution center. What if, and we did the analysis, what if we showed up with a semi-trailer when we could fill it and move it to our distribution center? We've already got totes going from our DC to each of the cath labs with CRM product, cardiac rhythm management products, pacemakers and the like. And so what if we built a model and optimized around that? So we now have a semi-truck. When we can fill it, about every 2 weeks or so, it's one event. And I'm sure the pickers all scatter when they see that order coming because it's going to take all day, right? 47 times 2 weeks, right? So, but it drove tremendous cost out. And we just, to the partnership word, we just did a handshake deal. We weren't sure how we were going to ink this. It was new to both of us. So we did a handshake deal and said we'll split whatever the cost is, right? So we agreed on a baseline metric. We took a look at the cost and we split it. They kept half of it, half of the savings. It was mostly on their end and mostly in transportation, a little bit in labor, and gave us the other half of it in the form of an efficiency fee for all of those products. So that then lowered the total net cost. Every one of those devices they sold to us, they sold at a higher margin because it cost them less to pick, pack, and ship that product than it did previous. And we use that efficiency fee to go have conversations with our competitors about getting on board with the program, right? So it helps us fund that distribution center that is the enabler for that savings. So it was a really good one, and like I said, we've done a power supply podcast on it, and it's out there, and I know D'Amica would be happy to share more details on how that's going at Trinity these days.
Chico?
Yeah, I'll take a little different tack, and I'll stick with kind of my theme here, right? So I talked about inventory, right? And so one of the key words for the students at Wayne State and for the rest of us who've been in the industry for a long time, you'll hear is perpetual inventory, right? The ability to see your inventory in a perpetual state, like go to a computer screen and say, how much of these do I have, right? Traditional legacy supply chain operations without the ability to see that, once you distribute inventory, it becomes expense on the P&L, right? it basically becomes consumed. So a finance person says, I've spent it, I need more. So they usually buy more. But we know those items are still in a finished goods state. They haven't been used. So think about procedure areas. We have an OR, right? And you have an OR doing 25, 40 cases a day. They're drawing on an inventory that's not in a perpetual state. It means supply chain finance cannot see it. So the partnership that I like to bring up is there are companies out there that offer technology that lets you extend the perpetual visibility of inventory. So think of it. Once it leaves our storerooms, it used to be expense in our finance and supply system. There's technology, RFID, cabinets, that you can place that inventory in the OR, and you still get your perpetual visibility. So we've extended the ability to see our finished goods. So then how does that help us? That same technology that's out there with the RFID can also say when you pull it out of the room or the cabinet, it tells the system, hey, that needs to be applied to patient care. Why is that important? Because we have to get paid for everything. So you'll hear a term called missed charge capture. So we are partnering with PIH, with a company, and we have to be careful of who we mention, who has technology and RFID that is engaged with our rev cycle stakeholders within the organization, the folks that go get us our money when we do patient care, supply chain team and analytics. And so when an item is pulled out of an RFID cabinet or space, it tells the system and tells the stakeholders, we're waiting to see that applied to a patient, a procedure. If it doesn't get applied to a procedure, it's called a missed charge capture. Before this technology collaboration, we paid people to laboriously go through documents and try to find these missed charge captures. And if anybody knows anything about chasing reimbursement, the insurance companies know that there's timelines and there's priorities, and they give you a small amount of time to go say, hey, you have to pay us for this. Usually, our legacy processes, the process cycle time that you displayed in your work, some of my own analysts have done the same thing, and we determined that our legacy processes take too long to go get the charge to get reimbursed by the payer. We have to improve our process cycle time to go to identify missed charges. This technology with RFID tells us, and our rev cycle partners, you are missing a charge. The part was taken, the supply item was taken out of the procedure room yesterday, and within 24 hours, we've identified that. We can quickly reconcile, tie it to the procedure or the event that was to, and we've been able to eliminate missing or lost charges. From an organization, from PIHL, who I work for, $2 billion organization, right now that's worth $22 million a year in previously missed charges because our process took too long to get paid. But the small investment partnership with companies who have this technology that's been out, you'll hear me say it again, it's been out there for over 20 years, but supply chain hasn't connected it and leveraged it the way it should. It was pitched out there for a cath lab technology. Today, you can use it all throughout the supply chain. So PIH Health is now deploying this technology in all procedure areas in the whole system, IR labs, cath labs, GI labs, main ORs, and ambulatory surgery center. And the cost to deploy these RFID technology versus the $22 million a year we're recouping in missed charge capture is about 10x versus cost versus return.
So staying with you for a minute, Chica, I'm curious, how did you, when you were at PepsiCo, how did you define a good business partner versus and how you see it defined in healthcare?
Yeah, so at PepsiCo, a little bit different, right? PepsiCo, big Fortune 35 company, good business partners, were pretty well established. But I will tell you, Joe, in the group in healthcare, what I've learned in healthcare is if I have a vendor or a business partner come in and they're playing the short game, and what I call the short game is they're trying to hit that number that quarter. They're trying to get a transactional business so they can go back and tell the sales teams, hey, I made a sale to PIH. But if they're playing the long game, if they want to be a true strategic partner, that one, they'll take the time to understand your current state. And that's what I love about what you presented today. Learn your current state. What are you struggling against? What are your pain points? And then say, how can I, and what I'm offering, what I'm selling, help you alleviate or eliminate those pain points? If you can't, then stick on the transactional side. But if you play the long game and you can become a strategic partner, as I mentioned, this vendor out there that's going to help us with the RFID and that technology, the long game return on both sides, much more valuable.
Ed, I know you've been, as I said earlier, you've been doing this a long time and fighting the good data fight for a long time. How did you find early adopters on the business partner side to work with you in these areas?
How did I identify them?
Yeah. How did you identify who you thought would be good partners and develop that relationship in a way that was beneficial to both of you?
Yeah, I guess it becomes evident in the information that we share, the reports that we share, what's being tracked. I think you can learn a lot from a business review with a business partner, kind of the data that's being shared, the quality, the time and attention that goes into the quality of the reports, I think kind of obviates the better data partners. They tend to come forward with information that is thought out. I do a guest lecture at university around data and the use of data. And I always spend probably 3 slides. I probably bored folks like you to death with this presentation, but I spend a lot of time asking the students to think about who you're presenting to, because it really matters how you present the data as to who you're presenting to. When I had this little trick that I used to do with spreadsheet. When I was going to present to a group of docs who never want to hear from us in supply chain, by the way, it's very, very rare. But when I present to a group of docs, I always accidentally, on purpose, opened up to the detail tab on my spreadsheet before I opened up the slides or the graphs. Because when they saw that minutia, all of those line items, all of that data on that spreadsheet, it's like, oh, I'm not going to ask a question about the data because he's got it. I dispense with that question and that interrogation 9 times out of 10 by accidentally on purpose showing them that line item detail and then backing into the graphs and talking about the graphs, and I had their attention. And so anybody that would bring data forward, a report forward, a presentation forward, that you could tell they'd thought about what's going to matter to Trinity Health in this conversation, and then did a quality job of assembling and presenting that data, I knew we had a good partner there.
I think part of the trick is admitting that part of the problem is us, right? And it's interesting, I did a conversation with, on the business partner side, all supply chain leaders, no sales in the room at all. And I said, tell me the number one thing that's keeping you from being more efficient. Nobody said anything. I can tell you, I said, the number one thing is your customer, me. The way I buy things, the way I do things, the decisions I make, the no long-term planning to be really to think of. And I said, and who's the second biggest culprit? It's your sales force, right? Trying to make quarterly numbers, trying to do the things they need to do, and that makes your supply chain do this. If you could eliminate those and have different conversations, what would those conversations look like? And so we actually did that with one of our business partners, and we discovered that we had one that was taking a pallet of 40, and we would order 40. They would break the pallet down into individual shipments of 40 boxes, each shipped separately, to ship it to us to our distribution center just for us to put it back on a pallet to put it on our shelf. And the reason why is their ERP system didn't have a unit of measure called pallet, right? But you don't discover that from the sales team, right? And think about the freight charges that we took for having each individual box shipped. And so those are the kind of conversations you start to have when you're first willing to admit that you might be part of the problem. When you build ERP systems that serve only you and not your business partners. What technology, Ed, is getting you excited right now that you see coming down that you think can really enhance what we're doing?
Well, clearly, I think some of the automation, the AI certainly, but again, I don't think we're prepared well enough with our data to be as efficient as we could be. But we had a lot of success at Trinity with RPA bots. I don't know if you guys are familiar with those, but they're basically a script. It's a computer program that performs the work that a human being would otherwise or historically have performed. And we dropped, actually, at Trinity Health, St. Teresa and St. Isidore log into our ERP system every day. They're two RPA bots that are running through tasks. They log into the ERP system, they look at the queues, they take action on the data that's in there, and send an email to somebody, or read an email back from somebody. We're putting some AI on top of that so they can do even more tasks. But when I retired last July, I think we were up to 23 FTEs worth of work that those bots were doing. And that work is the stuff the colleagues didn't want to do anyways. It's that tedious, monotonous, routine, non-value add stuff that they just dreaded coming in and doing every day. Now these bots take care of that and just spit an email over to them and say, here's one I don't understand, you're gonna have to handle that, right? And then they were working only on the things where they had to apply their gray matter. So I think there's a lot that we can do with that. It's going to require us, of course, to think differently about those colleagues that we're employing, how we help them get skilled up, as some of these bots will most certainly take away some of those jobs. Now our health system was growing, so we just didn't have to hire anybody when we bought more hospitals, and the volume went up. So
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge to new technology is changing your work to meet the technology, as opposed to making the technology change to meet your work and the way you're currently doing it. I find that to be the biggest rate limiting is we buy this really great piece of technology, but then we dumb it down because we can't raise the bar or change how we do our work.
Yep, well said.
Chico, clearly you're excited about the perpetual inventory tools. What other things or technologies do you see, even if they're just now coming into healthcare and maybe you had them before when you were at PepsiCo, that you're excited to see?
Yeah, I'll tell you, PepsiCo definitely didn't have what I'm about to talk about today, because we've all heard the word AI. And Ed just mentioned it, right? About 3 to 5 years ago, they were selling us bots, right? They basically says, hey, we can create a program, a bot, not an AI based, but that you can set, here's several tasks, and it'll execute those tasks, right? And then you can eliminate non-value added tasks from a human being. Today, I mean, we've all heard AI, but then, we have an AI committee at the organization, and it basically vets when a vendor can. I think almost every one of my vendors, even the ones selling me gloves, said something about AI, catchword, right? So we vet what's true AI, and what we've discovered is, and we're starting to see this recently, and so how many people have heard of agentic AI, right? So that's a term for folks in business, folks in supply chains. So agentic AI is AI that's thinking, understands the process. So a bot just says, my program says, it's just like a fancy algorithm. My program says, do this, go here, I see that information, do that. It's just basically doing tasks. Agentic AI understands the process, understands the task, is using data, perpetual inventory data, as I mentioned, maybe in these cabinets. It says, hey, I'm AI, we're getting close to our lower control limit on our inventory for cardiorhythmic devices. I now need to place an order in this system to make sure that that order is delivered within 2 days before the human being realizes they need it. That's agentic AI. They are talking about that today. I believe within 36 months, agentic AI, it'll probably just be a lot of things in healthcare. It'll start with the big folks that can afford it, but it will trickle down, and you'll have something called autonomous ordering and forecasting. AI-based tools connected to modern-day ERPs that can talk to your EHR, that can interact with systems that are managing perpetual inventory, and it's going to maintain 80 to 85% of your rolling inventory without ever a human being touching it. Today, that sounds like, 2 years ago, that sounds like science fiction. Today, not so much. Tomorrow, reality.
Yeah, I agreed. And now, there's a good bit of leadership that's required to implement something like that. I know one of our leaders got really excited about an AI agent. An organization was going to come in, and we're doing some analysis on whether we had appropriate data to do some of this work. And one of the problems they found was that the inconsistency in some of our data streams was going to prevent the AI from making quality decisions. So they got off on this tangent, and I put a stop to it. They got off on a tangent of, well, why don't we just use the agent to fix the data? So I said, no, there's a behavior that's creating the poor data. We're going to fix the behavior. We're not going to use agents to mask and modify our data. So put a stop to that, but there's going to have to be some real leadership applied to some of these tools, or they will be misused and I think actually harmful.
I feel very lucky because I came up in the beginning of my career with a lot of folks like yourself who introduced me to the profession, taught me a lot, started the ball rolling. We'll be talking some famers and Hall of Famers later who cut the way for a lot of folks. But I'm going to be around long enough because I have a 12-year-old daughter that I get through college, so I got at least 10, 15 more years to work that I get to watch Chico and others who are now coming up into the profession, and these young people here who will hopefully decide on a career in healthcare because we need those new ideas and those new ways of looking at things and to embrace these technologies and figure out how to use them and also figure out how not to use them. Because you also see a lot of organizations that spend a lot of money on something and never actually maximize it. And then they're just frustrated and they get mad about it. I mean, if you see the arc of distribution centers, right? At one point, everybody was building them, and you'd ask them why. Well, they got one, right? So I need to have one, right? As opposed to, do you have an actual distribution strategy? And I think that's the same thing that's going to happen with a lot of these technologies. Is some people are going to buy them just because everybody else is, and some people are really going to have a plan. And I don't think there's enough money in healthcare to waste it on, I think I have a plan. You have to have a plan, and you have to know what you're going to do because these things are not cheap. I'm going to open it up because we have a lot of really great people in this room who are really smart and a lot smarter than me and can ask better questions. So I'll run the mic over. I'll run the mic around, and you guys.
We're supposed to be talking about where do we stand? How do you think we're doing? Are we getting better or worse? That was part of the assumption of the talk. So it gets down to this: where are we? Are our organizations smart enough to be doing the right things? Whenever I see you guys talk, I really get upset because you represent the best of the best, and it may give people in the audience this idea that, oh, everyone's doing so well. And every place I go, I see the 80%ers out there that are still doing things the same damn way they have since I came into this business in 1969, okay? What do you think about that? Is the healthcare leadership smart enough to know what it needs to do? And if I were a young guy coming in smart like I did 50 years ago, and I wanted to push these ideas, I think Chico would be a good guy to ask this question to. How do I sell the concept to a point where people are going to be bright enough to adapt it over the long run?
Yeah. So thanks, Fred. So I'm optimistic, and used to be there was only. Well, let me back up. I went and got my master's late in my career in supply chain. And I'm going through the curricula, and it's like, I never heard us talk about demand planning. What's the square root of N for an inventory? What's it? All of the technical aspects of the profession, we weren't practicing in healthcare because we largely grew up, most of my peers back in the day, mom was a nurse. They started on the dock, in the loading dock, and they spent 40 years at the hospital or in hospitals, and now they're running the supply chain. So it was a lot of we spent a lot of time with ourselves. And what I've seen now is organizations like Wayne State here and others, there's universities very interested in getting involved in healthcare. And I see more, it used to be you'd have somebody spin out of industry, come into healthcare for a minute, and then go right back to industry, because of some of the things that you saw that was frustrating that helped you run a supply chain in another industry didn't exist here. But now those folks are coming in and staying. And I do think that we're on an uptick, and we're going to start seeing some dramatic improvement enabled by some of the technologies.
Great. And Fred, great question. So I'll give you some real world examples, right? So 10 years ago, I come into the health system. The team that I was brought in to replace 45 years, started in the mailroom, went all to supply chain director, and really held the line and got the system to where it needed to be. But when they brought me in, the reason, like, I get asked a lot of, hey, why did you come to healthcare? My organization 10 years ago had a specific strategy to look outside of healthcare, to maybe look a little bit, someone who hadn't come up 30, 45 years in healthcare and says, let's see how the other industries are doing it. And so they bet on me to do that and bring it in. And so I look back on it and go, and I remember going, 4 CFOs later from the guy that hired me who had this idea, and as I'm working with them all, it's because it was that opportunity to look at it from a different lens. And so what I've looked at the last 10 years is, I've already done my math. I probably got 12, 13 years left. I got a 15-year-old, got to get through college, 12-year-old too. So I thought to myself, who's going to hold this line when I'm gone? Behind me is no one who's got 30, 35, 40 years on my team. So when I look at my supply chain operations team, the average tenure is about 20 to 30 years. They're going to be sunsetting soon. So we have a strategy where we came in and I'm with the organization that says, hey, the future of supply chain leadership, the future of healthcare support, what's it look like? And so what I love about these Wayne State students is outside the names, they look just like my analytics team at the health system today. I have 17 young younger individuals, not yet young, who have, let's say, business degree, graduate degree. I love the Lean Six Sigma DMAIC approach. I send every single one to USC for 6 weeks to 16 weeks, depending on the level, to get green belt, black belt certified. It's how we came up, it's how you approach problem solving. What is the current state? What is the future state? What's the pain points? What are the root causes? Ask the question. When we came up, we just kept asking why until we figured out what the problem was, and we muscled through and figured out how to solve it. You're using data. My analysts are using data to figure out the why, right? And then the data, and then so my job as a senior supply chain executive, and many of us in this room, is to make sure the folks we report to understand that language. So I spent a lot of times getting my C-suite. And what I'm kind of really proud of, 10 years ago, nobody could spell Gemba in PIH Health. Today, I've got CNAs going, I went on a Gemba walk. We don't say rounding anymore in PIH Health. We go on Gemba walks, right? And so I've got them to understand there's a kind of a lens you look at. So it starts there, Fred, but then you got to mature it, right? And so what keeps me at night is those 17 analysts I have, how do I keep them motivated to say, I want to be Ed, Chico, Fred, Barbara one day, right? Because that's a long time. Or how do I keep an organization going with these young minds? It's the technology piece. It's the problems. They get up and they say, there's a problem to solve today. That's why a lot of us are in the industry, right? We're the firefighters. We're the problem solvers. So healthcare has lots of problems to solve, but you got to make sure that it's the toys and the tools and the methods and approach that they want to do, right? And so that's what I would offer, Fred, is we have to develop the next generation. I'm inspired by it. In about 6 years, I went from 1 to 17. They are all doing 5 to 7 distinct different process improvement projects like what we saw shared today. All of them have in common on the day they were hired, many of them outside of what they saw in Grey's Anatomy couldn't tell you what happened in the hospital. But today, those individuals, I can send into a boardroom, I can send into a nursing leadership meeting, they can apply their methodology, they've done the work on the analysis, and they can convince that room of stakeholders, 1, they know what they're talking about, 2, they can present at a certain level, enough to the point where the decision makers can make the appropriate data-based decisions. That's what I'm most proud of. On day one, they couldn't do it. But with a certain approach and commitment, you can get them there. I look forward to seeing some of these faces in boardrooms and nursing leadership meetings talking about ED throughput or talking about hospital-acquired infections, where today I know you have very minimal knowledge of that. You don't have to be a nurse or doctor to be able to solve that problem, but you can be a facilitator to help them understand what the problem is. And I think Ed mentioned that's what I love. Show a bunch of doctors a spreadsheet with a bunch of stuff and you see eyes gloss over. Tomorrow, you'll walk into that same room with your spreadsheet. You'll data visualize it a little bit differently, right? And maybe a PowerPoint or something where they can say, okay, that's me, so that they can make the right changes. So that's why I'm inspired of the future. It really starts here, and I'm glad our format at the universities having these projects, because many of us won't be here when you're chief supply chain officers, but we are hopeful that you choose to be that.
Yeah, I would add, Fred, just my own observation is those of us who've been in the industry for a while also have to be careful that we're not indirectly dismissive of new ways of approaching the work, because the technology and the tools that are available now and the skill sets that are coming into the profession are so much more advanced that I think we sometimes can be got to be real careful about telling war stories where it sounds like, oh, I tried that back in 1985 and it's never going to work again, right? We just got to sometimes just keep our mouth shut and let folks trudge on forward. And sometimes they'll fail, and sometimes they'll just knock it out of the park in a way that we never thought of.
I'll jump in and go back a bit for a moment and go back and talk about the data and the collection of data. All you guys, you and Joe and Chico and Ed all talked about the issues of bringing data collection into the same realm as it is in the industrial world. But within healthcare, you have all those myriad different parts. If you talk about orthopedics and cardiovascular stuff, and we've dropped the price on RFID tags from 60 cents, 70 cents down to 20 cents probably now.
It's on my notes. It's about,
10 cents.
It's about 3 cents now.
Yeah,
RFID tag.
but how do you attach those to small orthopedic implants? And the other thing you've got to do is you got to deal with the trunk stock, which still comes in from orthopedic vendors, and they bring it in and it's on consignment, and they bring it in, they pass it to the folks in the OR, and it never gets tracked.
Fills up the hallways, right?
Goes up the hallway.
Yeah.
And you guys have to have doorways equipped with the equipment to be able to track this stuff through the process and capture it as it's going through. You can walk into a grocery store and you can track it at the pallet level, but you don't track individual cans of Pepsi unless it's a barcode that's being scanned on the way out, not an RFID tag. So those are all complexities that I think you have to deal with within the infrastructure of healthcare and tracking inventories. Back to you guys.
Yeah, no, Dick, that's a great question. So I'll hit on a couple points, right? And you're right. Source of truth data in healthcare, right? There's lots of source of truth, right? Implant data, supply data. I will tell you, as my analysts were getting involved in this early on, a term that came up a lot was dirty data, right? And it's data that's difficult. You might have run into this at Cornwall Health, right? It's not a knock on the health system. We're kind of built to have these disparate data sources that aren't as clean, because for a spreadsheet to work properly, right, you need clean data. Does it make sense? Is it apples to apples across the board? So we're still struggling with that today, my analysts. So we spent an inordinate amount of time early on. So you might have noticed their slide, DMAIC, define, measure, analyze, improve, control. Measure is the reason you don't jump to improve control. You got to follow it in sequence, because as you stated, Dick, right, what's the problem? And then measure what's the data of the current state so we can analyze it properly. So I would say 40% of my Lean Six Sigma DMAIC projects that we do in our health system are spent in the measure phase. If you knock out the measure phase and you clean up the data and you get to the point where you can do proper analysis, the analyze, improve, control phase kind of fit right in there. And the other piece I'll throw in there, I talked a lot about, and Dick, you mentioned the perfect thing about that is, like grocery stores, you're not going to put an RFID tag on every box of cereal going to. But what happens is, when you purchase that box of cereal and it goes across the register, it's being scanned. IRI data. Your credit card is being associated with that. How often your credit card goes back in that store and buys that data, people like PepsiCo are paying millions of dollars for it. So we can do something similar in healthcare on the charge capture side, right? On that RFID technology I mentioned, how long it dwelled, I saw that on your presentation, in our health system, and couple that with the front end, how much we paid for it. When we have that entire visibility of the moment we buy something, how long it stayed in our health system, and when it ultimately ended on the charge, then we have the full ability to do the proper analysis. But great question, Dick.
Yeah, and I think you nailed the reason we're not further along, because we are an incredibly complex supply chain. We don't have just one supply chain. There's medical, there's food, there's EVS, there's laundry, right? We have many supply chains. Each of those supply chains have many SKUs. A manufacturing organization has a finite number of raw materials that come in to make a finite number of SKUs in finished goods. So I think therein lies our difficulty in moving further faster. And it's also pretty critical work. We want to make sure we get this right? Because not having the product is pretty detrimental in our circumstance. So I think that's why we haven't moved further faster. But like I said earlier, I'm encouraged because I'm seeing some young, bright minds in more and more universities with supply chain programs aspiring to come in and do this very purposeful work that we do. And it's just going to be eating that elephant, one set of SKUs at a time, and continue making those donuts, applying technology when and wherever we can.
One more ping. It's an RFID tag going off, but I'm just thinking about the stuff you're doing in terms of ARM and universities and supply chain management and Wayne State here, to go out and look at, not at the semi-tractors or the truckloads of stuff, but the trunk stock, and to go in and focus on that value-added opportunity in terms of tracking small items in terms of orthopedic and cardiology supplies and what the revenue impact is. Just a thought for you to pass back to the group. Thanks.
Yep. Sounds like a good future capstone. That's right.
So, I just want to add, so that RFID technology and those cabinets, we're in the process of telling vendors with trunk stock, no longer put it on a pallet, sit in the procedure area. You get one cabinet that you're going to pay for, and we're going to track all of your supplies in that cabinet. So just to let you know, that's one way.
So Chico, Ed, thank you very much. Any last thoughts you want to leave us with as we wrap up the session?
Yeah, I wished we had a couple more hours, right?
Always do.
Yeah, the only thing I would finish with, thank you for the opportunity, great discussion. You notice I'm real focused on this group here. If you're in the organization, you're a decision maker, and you're hiring, we see resumes, and yeah, I used to look at too, 20, 30 years, hospital experience, healthcare experience. I know that's a ready-made, open the door, plug-and-play person. But you got to take a chance on some folks with no healthcare experience. You got to take a chance on some folks that look at things differently, and we may not know what they're going to provide, but throw them in the mix. I tell you, someone from that version, you give them a little healthcare experience, 10 years later, you're sitting up here talking at a panel to a bunch of folks who have been running stuff for 40, 50 years. So you may miss once, but you're going to hit once. And I think for organizations, that's going to go a long way.
Well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate the audience and appreciate you, Ed and Chico.